So hello everybody, welcome to the Business Support Network. Today is a day that I've been really looking forward to because we're joined by Bonnie here, and I first reached out to Bonnie a couple of months ago it's probably the height of lockdown, wasn't it, Bonnie?
Yeah, it was May. I have it right here.
Yes.
May.
And I was keen to get in touch with Bonnie because as I put in my kind of promo bits and pieces together for this event, Bonnie is a very well-known face in the EAPA industry. She's one of the leading trainers in the world, and she's kind of really taken the mantle on pushing our industry to the forefront and making the most of the executive assistant position and assistants in general, and really upskilling them and doing what she can to be a real flag bearer for the community. So thanks for joining us today, Bonnie. It's great to have you on board. So let's dive straight into it. I'm sure a lot of people know exactly who you are, but just give us a bit of background of, for those that perhaps that don't know you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Paul, for having me and for doing this, having these series of conversations to talk about what's really going on, because boy, oh boy, we need that so much to bring the community together as often as we can with some real information. So I'm based now in Florida, but I'm from New Jersey, which is very close to New York City, for those of you who've been across the pond. For 25 years, I worked for the actress Olympia Dukakis and as her personal assistant. And over in America, of course, assistants are EAs. Yeah. But I truly was Olympia's personal assistant and executive assistant. We talked yesterday, actually, and she just is so delighted to understand how the work we did together is having a life. 9 years ago, I resigned from my work with Olympia in order to go off and teach and speak all over the world. And at this point, I've been in 14 countries and 38 states because I counted. And what is so clear is that as much talking as I do, I listen twice as much. And so I believe I really have a perspective on what's happening globally, mainly because I'm hearing directly from assistants. In the pandemic, we did a series of webinars, which enabled me to, just continue the conversation over email and in forums just like this, which has been so important. So I know that the assistants of the world are a very powerful and influential group of people. And so it is with those eyes that I come to the teaching of Be the Ultimate Assistant. And also what I see is a very volatile workplace right now, and it's been turned upside down. And so the assistants of the world have a really unique role to play. And while we're at it, we're going to end workplace bullying and close the wage gap, which are two very serious issues that are still affecting the profession. So there's plenty of work to do.
There is indeed, and I'm keen to dive into a lot of those topics and really cover those. Just kind of rewinding back for just a kind of a couple of steps. You say that you were. It's easier for me to say personal assistant or executive assistant because
sure.
In the UK that's just how we chat. So yeah. So a bit of training on that. I'll get there by the end of the conversation. So thinking back to when we were working in that role, just give us a just kind of brief overview of what your role really looked like there. Was it kind of all encompassing, kind of doing everything?
Yeah. Great question, because Olympia was the type of executive who I called her the queen of the delegators. If the spectrum of delegation went from 0 to 10, and 10 being the most, Olympia was a 10. Olympia wanted me to do, as her assistant, everything I could do that she didn't have to do. I couldn't memorize her lines. I couldn't go for her costume fitting. I couldn't have the meeting with the director. I mean, she actually once asked me to go to pick up her eyeglasses. And of course I couldn't do that because I don't have your face, Olympia. you know, so, but she was that kind of executive. And I'm well aware from my conversations with assistants all over the world, and not all executives are like her. But so my everyday, it was doing whatever it takes, whatever it took to get the job done, so that I did everything Olympia didn't have to do. So on any given day, my tasks were sometimes all personal and sometimes all business. The personal things were, you know, lamp shopping and booking a personal vacation, doing research on which Caribbean island the whole family was going to go to.
Sure. Okay.
Or buying a piece of property in a foreign land. Of course, that was business. The businessy stuff was reading over contracts, because even though she had an agent and a manager and a lawyer, I, as the assistant, looked at her contracts with different eyes than the manager did. I knew to ask for a hotel room with windows that literally opened. I knew what to ask for when it came to her preferences, and I'm sure every assistant on this call can relate to that kind of specificity, that kind of detail. So on any given day, it was very much, sometimes it was 50-50 and sometimes it was all one way. In my classes though, Paul, I often show a picture of a tennis player. You know, everybody can kind of picture when you're playing tennis, you have to be on the balls of your feet and to be responsive to like where the ball is going to go. And that's how I felt every day of my working life with Olympia. And actually one last thought on that is that what I have found is that there's one common denominator of every assistant on the planet. And that is every career assistant, that is. And that is that we love that no 2 days are ever the same. We love that idea that we have to kind of pivot and go, which is why the pandemic is not, in some ways, not causing assistants as much tumult as other people, because we're used to pivoting and like, okay, can't go over here, we're going to have to go over here.
Yeah, I love the analogy of being on the balls of your feet. And I when with my team, I often use a lot of sporting analogies with my team of coaching and stuff. And that's one that's never crossed my mind, but I love it because it does capture it perfectly, that you have to be there to kind of, I love that. I'm going to use that in future if you don't mind.
You're welcome. Yeah, absolutely. You're welcome to it. Honestly, it really was how I felt every day of my life. Every single day I walked in and I thought I'm sure every assistant can think this. You think you know what the day is going to be, but it could turn out to be completely different.
Yeah, fantastic. So from that kind of grounding, you went on to you went on to do lots of things to get to where you are now, obviously. So how did the kind of transition come about? Was it a kind of natural, okay, well, I've learned lots here, I really want to start giving back to the community? How did that how did you kind of transcend into that?
None of it was planned. None of it.
Often.
I was a theater and English major at college at Rutgers University in New Jersey. And so I'm a writer. I identify as a writer. And when I was working with Olympia early on, I remember thinking, how can I be the best assistant? How can I be as great an assistant as she is an actress? How's that going to happen? And I started looking around for books and classes, but mainly books. So I took myself to the bookstore and I found next to nothing. And I literally stood in the bookstore and I said, I think I have to write the darn thing myself. I think I have to write the book that I want to read. And, because I'm there thinking I could spend the rest of my life complaining about this, or I could do something about it. Honestly, and now with that kind of perspective, I look around and I see the profession is still 95 to 98% female. And it is because we are so dominated by females that I believe that there was such a lack of resources for this role, because assistants have been used to winging it for years and surviving and succeeding in spite of the lack of training and in spite of the lack of resources. So, this book, Be the Ultimate Assistant, is now in its fifth edition. When I wrote it, there was very little, next to nothing that looked like what we did, working for assistants. So when I wrote it, the internet enabled me to hear from assistants all over the world.
Yeah.
I knew that my experience would relate to assistants in New York and Los Angeles. I knew that. But what I didn't know was when I started getting emails from Malaysia and Singapore and Spain, and so surprising that they would, I have an email from an assistant in Malaysia who wrote, "I don't work for a movie star," she said, "but I walk in your shoes." That's how she put it. She said, "I walk in your shoes." And that's when I started knowing that assistants could relate to this material.
Yeah.
And then they started asking me advice and questions. And then to my surprise, Paul and everyone, I found that I had the answers, and that they made a difference. So it happened gradually. Olympia was amazingly supportive of the book. And then when I started looking around for classes and seeing nothing, I thought, well, I guess I have to design that too. And so when I resigned, when I finally said those words, I said to her one night in 2010, I said, "I have to talk to you." In fact, there was a dinner party at her house, and it was a theater gathering, and I was invited as both a guest, and I was, of course, like most assistants, working it. And at the end of the night, it was just she and I and her husband Louis, who's also was an actor. And I said, "I have to talk to you." And she looked at me, because she could read me so well after 25 years. And she looked at my face and she said, "You're leaving, aren't you?" And I said, "Yeah, I am." Yeah.
And she's, and presumably, given the close relationship that you had, presumably, obviously she was very disappointed, but she probably really supported the move and kind of backed you 100% of the way, I assume. Yeah.
She totally did. I mean, I learned what it meant to be a working woman from her, you know, as she navigated the very rocky land of Hollywood, and that landscape, which is really hard for women and especially hard for mature women. You know, Los Angeles isn't exactly crawling with, you know, older actresses. And she managed to be very, very, very successful in that. And I learned a lot by watching her do that. And what she would say to me is what I say to assistants now, which is, be the CEO of you.
Love it.
Be the CEO of you Incorporated. You're in charge of your career and your life. No excuses, no victimization. Let's take a look at what the landscape is, and then let's figure out how to navigate within that arena.
Fantastic. So we're 10 years in now from transitioning from the assistant into author, trainer, mentor, and what have you. And I know that quite recently you published a new website, haven't you? And kind of new programs and what have you. So what are you up to kind of here and now, and what's the focus of the kind of main work that you're doing?
Yeah, there's so much more to do, Paul. Oh my gosh, you know, as I've come along in these years, the pre-pandemic, these plans were in the works to have a new website and to put the Be the Ultimate Assistant workshop on demand, on video, essentially, so it could serve the rest of the English-speaking world. Because, you know, the class is limited to 30 assistants. It's a very personal experience. It's very customized. I speak with every student before they come. So that's impossible to scale, which I've been told about 1,000 times. But the pandemic just accelerated the timeline. And so it just, my traveling came to a screeching halt, and here I get to hang out in my beautiful home office in Florida. And so started, you know, I got myself into the studio in May. So that's why when you contacted me, I was like, you know, insanely busy trying to pivot from the live material to how do I get that on video and have it be successful. I see that there's so much more to do. You know, yes, of course, this is the way I make my living, by speaking and teaching. But I think those assistants in the world who know me understand that everything I've done, that this has not been planned. This has been out of frustration and out of a need that I see. And this stuff works. Like, it's so amazing that historically the group of assistants in the world has not had a lot of training. It has not been a role that's been valued enough to have training. But what we have proven now is it doesn't take much training to have assistants really run with it. I mean, there's another analogy that I use that I viewed this about myself. I see assistants in many ways as racehorses who have been behind the gates, and with education, those gates can get flown open and they run. It's so interesting, the different ways that they take what they know, which I call SME, subject matter expertise. Every assistant has SME, and many SMEs, actually, many areas of expertise. And it's a matter of tapping into that, because when you tap into that, that leads to confidence. And so yes, there's going to be, I urge everyone on the call to go to learn.bonnielowkramen.com. That's the beginning of the new material. But next Wednesday, we're launching the big site on which will just be bonnielowkramen.com, and also be theultimateassistant.com, to share what I see, because there's and if I can just, Paul, one more thing that is so important to me in this next phase, if you will. It's not enough to educate assistants. And it's not even enough to educate the executives who are working with the assistants. In America, it's considered a radical idea to bring together those two groups, the assistants and the executives. But it makes so much sense, doesn't it? In order to offer training together. But Paul, you're a recruiter. I believe that this next 2-3 years, I'm going to do everything I can to bring together 4 groups of people: the assistants, the executives, the HR professionals, and recruiters just like you. How would that be for a conversation? Would you like that?
I'm up for any conversation. I like any conversation.
Doesn't that make sense though?
It makes perfect sense to me. And I think I've been working, look, I've not been an assistant before, but I feel embedded in the community, because that's, throughout my career, that's all I've ever recruited for is PAs and assistants. And that spans over 20 plus years. And I remember when I first started, it would have been at the same time as you were an assistant. The landscape of the learning material, the way people were kind of treated, if we can be kind of honest about it, and and the working practices, very different then. Lots of improvements have been made. There's lots of, especially in the last 5 years, there's been a huge kind of real big movement, and driven by a collective amount of people, which probably between 10 or 20 that I can think of across, have really been driving it. But I think some great work has been done, great strides have been taken. But I think that people who have got a good network and a good reach, have got a responsibility to use that and use it to good effect. And that's why I'm always up for speaking to people who have got the same kind of mindset, which is how the whole business support network has come about, and bits and pieces like that. So it's great to, it's great to hear people that have got that kind of the same ethos. So whilst we think about being the ultimate assistant, if you could kind of sum up what the students would get from that in a couple of sentences, what would people get by kind of running with that, would you say?
The assistants who come to us are the ones who need to be the best. They want to be the best. They want to work at the top of their game, and they want to be excellent, not just on some days, but every day. And the class is about soft skills of leadership and communication, and really view how to be a strategic business partner, how to do that. But in addition, it also features Vicki Sokol-Evans.
Yeah.
And Vicki is based in Austin, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
From the very beginning, 10 years ago, we collaborated because I knew that there was no way to be an ultimate assistant without being excellent in the hard skills of productivity and computer technology.
Mm-hmm.
Vicki is a former assistant,
Yeah.
as am I.
Yeah.
And she holds at the time, over 15 certifications in Microsoft Office. So when I spoke with her initially, when we were introduced, I knew that that every assistant on the planet needed to know what she knew.
Yeah.
And that, Paul, is the magic combination.
Yeah.
The combination of being excellent at the soft skills
Mm-hmm.
and the hard skills together.
Mm-hmm.
That's the magic combination. And actually, it's not magic at all.
Mm-hmm.
Education is the key to all of this,
Yeah.
because that is giving assistants the confidence to work with any employer. It gives confidence to stand up to bullies, to speak truth to power, and it also gives the information to negotiate for a fair salary. There's far too many assistants in the world who are not making the money that they deserve.
Yeah.
And that's not okay with me. It's not okay with you either, right, Paul?
Well, it's not okay. No, I mean, I had a conversation with a client today who I kind of got the vibe that they were almost taking advantage of where we are in the world right now.
Yeah.
And almost
shame on them. Shame on them.
Yeah, almost kind of, although it wasn't openly, you can read between the lines, can't you? It's kind of, I can perhaps get away with paying less because there's more people in the market.
Right.
And it was, well, actually, what are you looking for here? Do you want someone who's going to push the business forward,
right,
and bring those skills to the table or not? So I'm interested to hear, because from the UK's perspective, we, unless we know friends, family, professionals over in the States and what have you, it's difficult to get a real handle of what things are like at the moment in terms of work-wise and how things have been affected, because all we hear is mainstream media and what have you. So we know what it's like in the UK, and I can share that with you if you want. You probably know, but it'd be interested to hear what's the outlook over there in the States at the moment. Is how's things looking?
I'm happy to tell you that. What I'm here in Florida, but I talk with recruiters all over the United States, and hiring has begun again. Most positions are happening virtually. Companies are being very cautious about bringing people back into the workplace. But what's interesting is that the human beings who are going into the office space, inevitably, many of them are assistants, and they're being considered essential workers. When I'm mentoring assistants to not, that if a company is doing well, that they need not accept a lower salary than they would have pre-pandemic. It's really industry specific. I mean, right now, the hospitality business, the entertainment business is dismally hurting. However, technology is, and healthcare, there are many companies that are doing extremely well in this environment. But unemployment is very high. There's a lot of, we know that this virus is here with us and it's not going away, and the death toll is very high. What's also very high are mental health concerns. The anxiety and the stress is off the charts. And it's been exacerbated. Frankly, I don't get political, but the election is in November, so there's a lot of anxiety around that. But there's also a lot of anxiety about the economy and where we're headed. And people are concerned about their futures at companies, about where it's all headed. And so that is making the case that we must come together as a community. Recruiters, I heard from a recruiter telling me that they get 3,000 applications for a particular job sometimes. Paul, how many do you get?
The numbers are off the charts at the moment.
Give us a number, please.
I would say probably about 2,000 or so at the moment. It's
okay.
Yeah,
So every assistant on the call knows what that feels like. Like, I just want to cry when I hear that number. And so we have empathy for you. And what that also means is that it really is a better move to use one another, to leverage your contacts, to see if someone you know, or someone who you know who knows someone else could walk your resume, your CV into the hiring manager's office. Like, there are new rules in this workplace. The rules that applied pre-pandemic do not apply anymore. And there's something very freeing about that. And I urge everybody listening to look at opportunity, like times of change or times of opportunity. And so there are a lot of opportunities happening right now. There's a sense of cautious optimism as hiring is beginning again. Silicon Valley and San Francisco is booming.
Of course.
Lots of jobs are starting, but it's very it still feels really weird because it's all happening virtually, and there's just such uncertainty about when life is going to go back to any kind of normalcy.
Yeah, I think that's much the same as the UK. I think the big thing that we have perhaps noticed in the assistance world, if you like, is the uncertainty, and there has been way more job losses than we would have hoped in terms of redundancies and stuff like that. So for assistant work. So that's quite worrying for the industry. But when you say about all the rules have changed now, I couldn't agree more. And you know, a tiny example of that is next week I'm going to go live to help assistants in their job search of approaching companies directly and not going through a recruitment agency, which, you know, to think we would be putting something like that together 6 months ago is probably unheard of. But everyone's got a responsibility to help out the community as much as possible at the moment, haven't they? So, you know, that's what it's about. Before we we allocated about half an hour for this call. So if anybody's got any questions, please pop them in. I'd
love to know what they are.
Yeah, pop them in the chat and what have you.
Ask me anything.
Yes, I've got a question for you, because you've mentioned it a couple of times, and it's centered around you know, shining a bit of a spotlight on bullying in the workplace. You've mentioned about kind of fair salaries, but these are two things that I've really picked up on this conversation. That's something that obviously you're kind of really kind of pushing for. I take it.
Here's the thing about bullying. In fact, for those of you who have your webcams on, can you just raise your hand if you have either witnessed or experienced workplace bullying in your careers? Okay, we have several hands. When I ask that happens everywhere. There's very few assistants who I've met who have not either witnessed or experienced it. I view it as a global epidemic. It's a huge problem, and it's a problem because it slows us down and it stops us dead in our tracks from moving ahead. We get paralyzed by behaviors like yelling and profanity and being humiliated and being ostracized and, you know, frozen out. And it's, you know, that's particularly a risk factor when you're working at home alone. So bullying did not stop with the pandemic. It's just looking different now. And I just posted an article, a blog post on LinkedIn about virtual workplace bullying. For a long, long time, this problem has been shoved under the rug, and leaders have looked the other way because it's hard to deal with. It's messy. You know, those who know me know I talk about the elephants in the room. The elephants in the room are the subjects that are tricky and complicated, but we have to talk about them. Why? Because they're preoccupying us. Every person knows what it means to be just preoccupied with worry, whether that's worry about, is the bully going to attack me again today? Or I can't pay my bills. These issues should be of importance to leaders because they are cutting into productivity, cutting into retention. You've got to know that when you treat people disrespectfully, abusively, they're looking for the exit, and they might not leave right away, but for the time they're there, you've got to know you're not getting the best work out of people. This really doesn't take, a master's degree to figure that out. I don't, I spend a lot of time talking about it because we know as assistants that the only way to solve anything is to shine a light on it and to talk about it in all of its, darkness. Because then we can say, oh, okay, we have to do this. Yeah. What is so true, and sexual harassment is part of bullying. And so the whole Me Too and Time's Up movements that had been really gaining some traction before the pandemic have not gone away, but it's certainly not front page news the way it was pre-pandemic. But that's another thing, that we cannot rest until these issues are addressed in a very big way at our companies, because it's hurting our human capital. On one hand, Paul, it feels so contradictory to me to say, oh, our staff is the backbone of our company. They're the right arms to our leaders, and yet on the other hand, treat them so badly, not pay them well, to be abusive. So it doesn't make sense to me. It's not okay. And my hope is that and what I see is that it's not okay with a lot of people in the world, including leaders like you. And so if you go to learn.bonnielowkramen.com, I've put together a white paper about bullying. There's a whole tab on my website about it. It matters because we need to fix this for ourselves, but how about for our kids? And women aren't the only ones being bullied or sexually harassed. It's males as well, right?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, I totally agree. I know I agree with everything that you're saying. We've run over by a couple of minutes, but do you have a few minutes to answer some questions if I fire them off to you?
I do. I have about 15 more minutes if you all want to hang in there.
Right, let's do it. We've had some questions come through. So how do you cope with, so somebody's asking, how would you cope with an executive who treats you differently to the rest of the company?
Yeah, it is about specificity. I don't know how long you've been with this executive, but certainly if you're within the first year, everything's up for negotiation and addressing in that time period. So that is the time to ask a lot of questions and to address issues. I've written so many articles about addressing bullies directly. When you say treat you differently, it is about being specific about what that feels like. This question is important for everybody on the call. Think to yourself, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the most, how much stress is this causing you? Whatever it is, the being treated differently. If that is 6 or above on any sustained level, that's a red flag saying we have to address this. And it could be you put a note in writing, no emotion, just facts. Joe, I'd really like to talk about what happened in the meeting yesterday when you said this. You may not know it, but it really hurt my feelings, or I found it offensive. That's talking to the elephant in the room. That's saying the thing that is hard to say. We as women in general with this profession, we haven't been trained to say the words that, it's hard to say to a bully, you cannot talk to me like that. No one talks to me like that. But there it is. We have to get educated. Part of my training is to educate assistants. So I would urge you to come up with, very specific, document examples. It isn't okay to just say you always treat me differently. It's about how are you being treated differently. And then the next time it happens, to then go into Joe, or just say, I need 10 minutes. I need to talk to you about what just happened. Because if it's preoccupying you, you've got a stress level of 6 and above, do yourself a favor and address it, because the price we're paying is too high. We drink too much, we smoke too much, we take drugs, we know what sleepless nights feel like and headaches. It's not worth it.
Yeah, definitely. So we've had another question from someone here who met you at the Glasgow PA Network a couple of years ago.
Hey.
And the question is, how long do you think it will be before artificial intelligence makes a real impact on assistance roles?
You know, just like the mobile phone and the laptop computer did not replace you, they are our tools. They are our tools. You know, even Siri and Alexa are our tools now, enabling assistants to do higher level tasks. The assistants who are going to, there's a lot of volatility in this workplace, I'm not going to lie. So how long? My guess is, I think the pandemic is actually putting it back. So I think it's probably going to be about 5 to 10 years, 5 years-ish is my guess. However, our move as a profession is to embrace the new technology. Don't fight against it. Be the early adopter. Hang out or, you know, collaborate with computer, you know, your IT people about what's coming next. Get your certification, become knowledgeable, because the next big hot areas, cybersecurity and hacking. The bad guys are getting more and more sophisticated. So if that is an interest to you, I would embrace it and learn about it. And I believe the role is not going away. I believe it is morphing and changing, and more assistants are functioning as business partners. And that's why the titles are going to be changing, is what I see. I see the word assistant being phased out in favor of coordinator, manager, more responsive to, more reflective of the responsibility you're actually holding. And it's great to see you again, Lorraine, from Glasgow.
And that makes perfect sense. And it's a question that's come up quite a bit. Actually,
yes.
And I know Jeremy Burrows, I had a long conversation with him, and he works for an AI company, and he, you know, we all know about Jeremy, and you know, he said the same thing about embracing it, using it as part of your skill set to make you a better person. You know, and ultimately, a piece of technology is never going to be able to replace the intuition that two humans have between each other about, as you said, going back to what you said earlier on, being able to put in contracts hotel rooms with specifics, and putting in a schedule where, you know, you've got one meeting here, okay, this time frame isn't going to work because of logistics of this. You know, it's only human intuition that can kind of come up with those things, isn't it?
Yeah, only a computer is not going to be able to tell, a bot is not going to be able to know that your executive's child was not feeling well the day before, and so he'd better get to the baseball game or the soccer game a little early just to make sure, or he's feeling nervous. You know, like until we all turn into computers, there's going to be a need for humanity, for the personal touch. I know we're all walking around with so many devices, so I'm really glad we got to this point, that the humanity, the personal input from one another is never going to go out of style. As long as companies are run by human executives, they're going to need human beings in collaboration with them.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, let's rattle through the last couple here. We're having an issue with executive understanding the high value that assistants can provide. Assistants are feeling undervalued. How do we get executives on a better level / understanding? You touched on this a bit earlier on.
Great question.
Yeah.
It's about showing them what's in it for them. I'm sorry, Paul, you were going to attach a question to that one?
No. Go on, carry on.
Okay. Your job is to show what's in it for them if they allow you to be the racehorse that you are and give you the runway. I love the question. Could we give that a try? To say, hey, I was listening to a webinar and came up with an idea, and heard this idea. Could we, this is my idea, executive, could we give it a try? Could I have access to your inbox? Let's try it for 2 weeks, a month. Executives don't want to feel boxed in. They but they don't know your value. They don't know what they don't know. I was talking to a leadership trainer the other day. It blew my mind. She actually said, she's been doing this for 30 years. She said 100% of leaders say to her that they don't know what to do with their assistant, that they're confused by their assistant. So the only way they're going to know is if we tell them, you need to manage your managers. Now think about it this way. It's really dollars and cents. You might have some idea about how much your leader earns per year. You can kind of do a calculation on how much they're worth per hour. You know what your time is worth per hour. Is your executive really wanting to spend his or her hourly rate on doing correspondence and doing his own or her own calendaring? Like, no, we need to make the case. People should do what they're really eminently qualified to do. Executives are there to do whatever it is that they've been hired to do, not your job. And it's your job to show them in the most diplomatic way what's in it for them if they say yes to you.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Love that answer. So last one to finish off, I think it'll be a very simple one. What would be your number one top organizational tool to master right now? Kind of a certain piece of technology?
Okay. Well, OneNote is super popular all over the world as a repository for, it's so highly searchable. It's really brilliant in that way. But the big thing we're hearing is about Office 365 and Teams. That Office 365, according to Vicki Evans, who is has the bat phone into Microsoft, says that Office 365 can pretty much do what a lot of other softwares do, like Slack, etc. So there's a project, there are softwares that are built right into Office 365 that have the full capability, and they all play nice together. They all can share with each other, because before we leave this, it's so important for me to say this. We not only have staff who are going to be retiring soon because they're baby boomers, but I'm talking about succession planning. I'm talking about what if people have to leave suddenly, either by retirement or by COVID. We need to protect our companies and stabilize them. And the way nothing destabilizes a company quicker than if all of a sudden, in a heartbeat, you've got a key person who has to be pulled out because they get sick or because one of their family members gets sick. So we need to organize ourselves in collaboration with our peers, with our teams, in order to play the what ifs, because this virus isn't going away. And they're saying that there's going to be a second wave, that there's going to be another virus. There's going to be another crisis. Pre-pandemic, we were talking about active shooters. We were talking about terrorism. That we are talking about extreme weather in certain places. It feels like, we've really made Mother Nature mad. We've got a very volatile world, and the assistant is sitting in a really influential, powerful seat with a vantage point of running the what ifs, of asking the questions that your leaders are not asking right now. They're just not asking it because they're in chaos. HR is in chaos trying to figure out how to do re-entry. How do we bring people back safely and not get sued? They're not thinking about the executive assistants. I promise you, if you don't have a job description, a written job description that's accurate, create it yourself, because job description equals money. Offer yourself, be the one to run towards the problem that you see in front of you. If you should be at that meeting on this week, ask to be there or just show up. That's being proactive is the very best advice I can give each and every one of you.
I love it. And I echo that from somebody that, hasn't worked as an assistant, but can see both sides. Proactiveness is the key. So Bonnie, look, one amazing 45 minutes. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. So listen, one last thing, wear a mask. This is my mask.
I love that
It's
you can.
transparent.
We can see your mouth, so we'll be able to understand what you're saying. So,
Yes,
yeah.
yes. If we have to wear masks, we have to be able to see each other.
Yeah.
Please, this was not very much money on the internet. Stay safe, stay
Yeah.
healthy.
And you. And it will be lovely to see you the next time you're in the UK, and likewise when I'm over in America. So, Bonnie, thank you so much for jumping involved. We really, really appreciate it. Just remind everyone how we can get in touch with you before you go.
Yeah, my email, bonnie@bonnielowkramen.com. And if you want to check out the bullying white paper and the on-demand class, learn.bonnielowkramen.com. I'd love to hear from you and to support your work as you go forward. They need you. Your leverage is they don't want to live without you. So please know that.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Bonnie, thanks so much for your time. Guys,
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
We'll see you all soon. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye, Lorraine. Mwah.